y'all. Welcome to Outlaw, where we do the ins and outs, the ups and the downs of the latest legal fights. I'm Geoff Henley, your host, and with me, as always, is Rosina Ortega, civil lawyer in my law firm. And today we have a special guest, board-certified attorney Brady Wyatt.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, Jeff.
Fantastic.
Rosalina, thanks for having me.
Tell us about yourself a little bit, Brady.
Okay, well, born in Dallas. Actually, I'm not born in Dallas. I was born in South Dakota. Moved to Dallas when I was 10 years old and have been here practicing law for 26 years. Was at the district attorney's office after I graduated from law school from SMU in 1998. Was there for 2 years and then hung out my own shingle, started my own practice defending citizens accused.
So he represents the guys who sometimes wear the black hats.
That is something that does happen every once in a while. And, every once in a while, I've got to represent somebody who used to wear the white hat who did something wrong while they were prosecutors.
Wait, what is that? What is the whole black hats, white hats thing?
Well, if you're a black hat, you are a defense attorney. You are not fighting for justice. You're not fighting for the good of the community. You are fighting for the defense of individual citizens and their rights. I don't think it should be a black hat. I think it should be two white hats. We're part of the same system. We're defending the Constitution of the United States, which is the law of the land set up by our founding fathers. Those were pretty smart guys. They kind of knew what they were doing.
So the whole black hat, white hat goes back to the Old West.
Okay.
The lawman always wore the white hat, and the Bart Death or Dark Bart guy would wear the black hat. That's where that etymology comes from.
Okay.
Is that why this is called outlaw? Because we wear the black hats?
It is called outlaw because we show people how to fight, how to outnumber, how to outgun, how to outwin, and outlaw the opposition.
I like it.
So the first episode that we're attacking here is all about no-body homicides. No-body homicides have intrigued Anglo-American audiences for, frankly, 400 or 500 years. It began in the Middle Ages when there were a handful of these cases that happened where someone was convicted and hung or otherwise executed, and then the victim rolls into town maybe a few months or maybe a few years later.
Are you talking specifically about the guy that was kidnapped in England, sent as a slave to Turkey, and then returned to England 2 years later after the alleged perpetrators of his murder were hung?
That was one among a handful of them. There were about three that were, and they were so scandalous at the time that the British court said, They issued an edict. A jurist by the name of Hale said, you have to have a body. We are not going to let authorities prosecute these cases without a body because it is such an abysmal circumstance to have a victim come walking in after everybody said, hey, George is back. And then
Frank and Billy were innocent. Oh, yeah, they were hung 4 years ago. Oh, sorry about that.
Right. And so it then became a big deal, like, we have to have physical evidence. And it lasted into the United States all the way up until the 1990s. There was a profound concern about having the body, particularly in the Old West, because you might have some guy disappear in a snowdrift or just get lost in the mountains.
Fall down a mine shaft.
And frankly, too, keep in mind the people who are getting killed, sometimes there are other things swirling around their lives that might make them want to disappear.
Absolutely.
And so, historically, there has been this long tradition of resistance to foster, much less believe, these prosecutions without a body. But beginning in the 1990s, and including one by yours truly, these cases became very winnable, especially when you applied yourself and you marshaled the circumstantial evidence that is typically surrounding these cases. And we have some that are very fresh, very new here in Texas and across the nation, because it always happens. It frequently occurs. And the one that's got everybody's attention is down in San Antonio right now. It began last October. It involves a nice-looking realtor by the name of Suzanne Simpson and her husband, Brad, who's now under indictment because Suzanne's body still has not revealed itself. It all began apparently on October 6th, where the couple had a fight outside of what's called the Argyle Club. It'd be kind of like Park House to you and me.
Exactly.
The Argyle is in the Los Alamos or Almost Park neighborhood of San Antonio.
Very nice part of town.
Nice part of town in San Antonio. It's a social club, and the couple were seen arguing outside of this thing, and then they split ways, and then later on they got back together. Still later in the evening, outside of the residence of the home, they're arguing again, and this time it gets a little physical, according to a neighbor.
Yep.
And then Suzanne goes running towards some woods, and Brad takes after her. Well, what's kind of strange, I have to tell you, the accounts that I had seen was the neighbor doesn't really call the police. He goes and gets a flashlight after he hears either a gunshot or something that's
screaming. He hears 2 or 3 screams in the woods, goes and grabs a flashlight instead of picking up the phone and calling 911 immediately. So you've got an argument, you've got a chase, then you've got into the woods and a couple of screams, and this guy doesn't pick up and call 911.
Yeah, that one really did scream to me like, well, you know, I just don't. It kind of reminded me of my oldest brother, who refused to call the police on me and my neighbors and my brother when we got a tree on fire. We caught this massive tree. It was on fire. It almost threatened to burn down the neighborhood. And this neighbor from across the street, his name was Dr. Perry, comes over and it's like, hey, let's get the police call. And my brother's like, I ain't gonna do it, but I'll help you put it out.
That sounds like a good brother, right?
He was a great brother. So I'm wondering if maybe that neighbor was doing that, but the neighbor goes and he tries to help search, and then apparently goes back in the house. He hears Simpson's truck start and then stop, and then he goes and departs, and we don't ever see Suzanne Simpson again.
Correct.
And so the neighbors and friends of Suzanne kind of begin talking amongst themselves. I guess they got the idea that something had happened. They hadn't heard from her, hadn't seen from her. And then they're telling Brad, look, you haven't called 911? I think we need to do that.
Haven't reported a missing person.
Haven't reported a missing person. You haven't done it at all. It's like, don't you care about your wife?
Yeah, this isn't a neighbor down the street. This isn't some passing acquaintance from your law firm that doesn't show up on a Tuesday. This is your wife, and you're not calling in at least for a police report, have somebody show up at the house, do anything for a missing person. Hey, maybe she did go to Mexico. Maybe she went to go to her sister's house or her mom's house. But you know what? If you haven't seen her, you haven't heard from her, it's time to make the phone call to the police.
And not only is she a wife, but she's a mother, right? I mean, as someone who got to the Parenthood Club late in life, you really become to realize, oh my gosh, you're not going to just check out and not tell your kids what's going on. You might have taken them with you, but in this case, I believe she has a 5-year-old and like a 15-year-old, a daughter, a younger daughter, and an older son, and so no indication to them whatsoever what's going on. So the police saddle up. They speak to Brad Simpson. And he makes, and I'm sure Brady will shed some light on this, he makes what some of the classic mistakes that a lot of these defendants make, and that is he gives conflicting statements about time.
The first mistake is talking to the police, period.
Spoken like a true criminal defense attorney.
Right off the bat. I mean, you have a Fifth Amendment right not to engage with the police if you don't want to. And I tell a lot of my clients, it's in the top 10. It's in the Bill of Rights. It's a big one, number 5. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that if you are going to speak to the police, if you want to tell your side of the story, and a lot of people can't be held back from doing that, you've got to have a lawyer present. You've got to have somebody there to control what's going on or what's coming out of your mouth.
And it's so funny, and I say funny not as in ha-ha, but it is astounding because, we encountered this in civil practice, and I certainly did as a prosecutor, that people, and I've actually represented, I don't know, a few dozen criminal defendants, but nothing like the hundreds or thousands that you have. But it's astounding at how people always think that they can just talk their way. Oh, if they just hear my version, it'll be just fine.
And guys, I don't know Brad Simpson. I've never seen the guy. I've seen a picture of him on the internet. But guys like this, or from affluent neighborhoods who are highly educated, they're the people that give the statements the most. The people on the street, they know better. Their mama told them don't talk to the cops. Okay, and then I got a guy like this who goes in there, and I'm smart. Hey, I'm rich. I've been successful throughout my life. Man, I can handle these cops. And
right.
You know what? Those police officers are trained. They go to training to break down guys like this. And you know what? When you go in there and you're on your own, then you know what? You're on your own.
Well, and the other thing, too, it's not just because I think some of these weren't even custodial, under the Klieg light type situations, but there were these kind of casual conversations that I always worry about with clients during deposition, during a break, where they feel like, you can let your guard down now. It's just us, girls. It's just us boys. We can just talk.
We're all friends here.
We're all friends here. He's speaking to me nicely. And then they just kind of prattle on. And in this particular case, Brad Simpson gives two accounts. And he gave, that's the other thing. It's not like when you're talking to a detective that's the only person engaged in the process.
That's right.
There are lots of people. And in this particular case, the almost policed small suburban type outfit is working hand in hand with the Texas Rangers.
Yes.
So they are going to have various student investigators, lots of resources. They've got some FBI forensic stuff with the cells that you're going to hear about, and they are not idiots, and they are not dealing in a vacuum. And so Brad Simpson tells one group that. The last time I saw my wife was around 11 p.m. On the night of the argument, which is about an hour after the disappearance in the woods and the scuffle and all that.
And the truck driving away.
At night. But then he tells another group that, no, I saw her. I peeked into a room where she was sleeping. I was taking my daughter to school the next morning, and it was around 6:30, and I peeked in, and there she was and asleep. One of the things that stood about that to me was, wait a second, not only is he giving us a different time, but he's also suggesting, you know what? We're sleeping in different bedrooms.
Yes.
There is another problem in this household that I have to think that he didn't even think about when he mentioned that.
You just gave them validation by saying that she's sleeping in another room, even if it's true or not. But now you can say, the police officers can say, you know what, that fight that occurred outside the Argyle or the screaming that we heard, they were in a domestic situation anyway, because that's the only reason why. I know why I sleep on the couch. And that's when my wife gets mad at me.
Well,
not that really ever happens, right?
Sometimes your neck's a little stiff, or maybe you want to watch a little something on the TV. But
you're exactly right. By telling two different stories, and one that places her back at the house at that point in time is easily verifiable by the children.
Oh, okay? It's terrible. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is just it is something that, even if he were to be exonerated, that is the kind of thing that I would just leap all over during closing argument.
Absolutely.
And so now things are really beginning to swirl around old Brad about, okay, you've got a fight, a physical altercation, a scream in the woods, a disappearance, and two conflicting stories. And so eventually the police go and obtain a PC affidavit. Tell us what that's all about.
So a PC affidavit, probable cause affidavit is when one of the lead detectives draws up the facts as they know them at this point in time. This person is under criminal investigation. They are in harm's way, and it sounds like he put himself in harm's way by A, meeting with the police officers, B, telling two different stories, and then C, not calling 911 when his wife, the mother of his children, has gone missing. So a PC affidavit lays out all the facts to the best of the detective's ability that he knows at this point in time, and he is asking a magistrate either for a search warrant, or he is asking for a wiretap, or he is asking for an arrest at that point in time. And it depends on whether it's a PC affidavit for an arrest warrant or a search warrant at that point in time. I would think at this point in time you'd be looking at a search warrant. We have a missing cell phone from the Albertsons parking lot. We've got a missing person at this point in time, and we have a timeline that is not making sense that he's already blown. So that's enough to at least get a search warrant and possibly even an arrest warrant.
And that's what they were doing. They then kind of proceeded down the forensic telephone path. And one of the things that, and I wanted to get your opinion about this, Rosina, was one of the things that Simpson had done was he contacted AT&T that night and had them shut off Suzanne Simpson's phone service. And then there were multiple times over the next few days where he would turn off his own phone. And let's talk about that. I mean, when the idea of calling up a phone company and saying, I'm really mad at my wife or my lover or whatever you want to call this person, I'm going to shut off this person's service. What do you think about that one, Rosina?
I think it shows how controlling he is, right? Along with like all the other things that he would usually do to her. So,
well, apparently some friends of the family, I think it was the bank teller who said this, that he's done that in the past. Mm-hmm. That when he would get angry at her, he would cut off. He would either try to cut off the phone, or he would take her phone away from her and then tell the children that she had lost it.
How did the bank teller know that?
Apparently, she had confided. Because obviously in domestic situations, if something's been going on for a while, little bits and pieces kind of, leak out here and there. And so when you add the forensic phone data in there, the case just piles on. And one of the things that that really, the fingers just really start going in Brad's direction was when he went shopping. What did Brad Simpson buy at the Home Depot, and why do you find this so troubling, Brady, if one of your clients should ever be faced with this?
Well, this is a new fact I found out when I was talking to you before we went on the air today, is that when he went to Home Depot, I believe he purchased some hardware. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I didn't remember if the saw, if that's what you're talking about, was purchased then. So I don't know that the saw was purchased then yet, but what absolutely had been purchased was Quikrete. What exactly is Quikrete, Brady?
Quikrete is a bagged concrete mixture that has to be mixed usually with a power tool, where you dump it into one of the Home Depot 5-gallon buckets, you add some water into it, you mix it up into kind of a slurry, and then you pour it for quick setting concrete. It's heavy, it's easy to move as far as, pouring something of that nature. You can keep it in a bucket, it'll stay moist for a long time. You can take it somewhere else. You can use it to help out your foundation at home, shore up some steps. Put it in a barrel with a body and sink it to the bottom of a lake.
Yeah, I didn't think that was it Chip and whatever the gal down in Waco, the home builders would be using Quikrete for that.
Chip and Joanna.
Yeah, they're not going to put that in there. They're going to get real concrete. This is something that's used for patching, but it is heavy, it's easy to get, and it's readily mixable.
And the thing is sure. The defendant could have been doing a driveway patch or something like that. But here's what else he purchased. He also got the bucket, which has other applications for certain. But there were a couple of other things that screamed to me problematic. He bought a bunch of Clorox, which, if you're patching your sidewalk or your driveway, you're probably not necessarily going to need any Clorox to clean any implements, whether it's a trowel or a shovel or anything like that.
Wait, how much Clorox did he buy?
It was a pretty decent sized bottle. I think it was about a 30-ounce bottle.
Okay.
But I mean, Clorox, classic bleach, germicide, typically
Cover smells very well.
smells, cleans up all kinds of brain matter, blood matter, any sort of bodily fluid. I mean, those are the kinds of things bleaching agents are good for, but they also leave their own telltale signs, that strong odor of bleach. And so he had the Clorox, he had the Quikrete, he had the tub or the Home Depot bucket. He also had some trash bags. He bought a box of, I believe it was 32 or 30 trash bags, and in the surveillance affidavit, the police pay tremendous attention to this. This is about a 15-page affidavit that they wrote up, and they trace from surveillance footage. Mr. Simpson, I hope you're listening. They were watching you, a lot of places that you were going. He went to a Valero gas station. He went to, Home Depot, H-E-B. He went to a Whataburger. And you have to credit the police in this instance. They really not only tracked the truck, but they paid close attention to what was in the bed of the truck. They actually watched how the contents of the truck kind of emptied out. And then in one instance, it was gone. The trash bucket, I think, was gone. The trash bags were gone. But still an ice chest was there, one of the other implements that he was carting around in his truck. And when we say carting around, the other thing that this affidavit spells out in precious detail is that these folks live in I guess it's Almost Park, outside of San Antonio. Well, Brad Simpson was driving his truck to and fro the adjacent counties, including to a property out in Bandera County where authorities rolled up on him next to a fire pit. Now, Brady, so the deputies in Bandera County had rolled up on Brad, and he's got a fire pit there. This is within about 2 or 3 days, a few days of the disappearance of his wife. He's next to a fire pit. We have all this other evidence here. And the deputies, the authorities, were able to salvage 3 cell phones that had been in that fire pit.
Wait, so what did he tell the deputies when they rolled up on him?
I don't think it was terribly convincing, but keep in mind, and this is one of the things that kind of go back to what Brady and I were talking about earlier, is, when a defendant is interacting with separate agents of law enforcement, particularly if they're separate agencies, he's thinking that everything is in a vacuum, that these people don't sometimes or somehow eventually communicate with one another about what they've seen.
And they'll even go so far as to say, well, you know what, if the Texas Rangers are looking at this and Los Alamos police are looking at this, then, or maybe even Bandera County Sheriff or, Bexar County Sheriff are looking at this, and they say, well, you know what, they must not have that much. They're bringing all these people in to put extra sets of eyes on this, and really, that's a good thing for you. No. That's a very, very bad thing for you.
It is astounding that the arrogance that sometimes comes about it, because they'll sort of reaffirm that interaction, that they may have had a day or a few days earlier with other law enforcement, and they walked away with that or got away with it in their mind, and they're emboldened to think that, oh, okay, well, that guy didn't put cuffs on me immediately, so I must be okay to continue doing what I'm doing.
That's right. I'm so smart. I got away with it then. I am going to interact with these guys anytime that I feel like it or they want to talk to me. I've got them on the ropes. They got nothing on me. And it's astounding the delusional aspects of a criminal defendant, especially one that is trying to cover their tracks, and they don't know. There are so many different surveillance systems that are available to law enforcement. There was a case just out of Waco where a guy had brutally killed his cousin, and they were both drug dealers. He just recently got out of prison. He kills his cousin in a drug deal gone bad and burns her in a plastic bucket. They can't even figure out who this person is. But the deceased person's dog stood by the body the whole time at the burn pit. And it started a little grass fire. The sheriffs were called in from McLennan County. They put the fire out, and a neighbor comes over and goes, "Hey, this fire's going on. Hey, what's her dog doing? What's Georgina's dog doing over here?" I'm not sure that was her name, but he was able to identify the dog, which identified the person who was deceased, and the bucket burned up in plastic, encased in plastic after the plastic melted. And then they used a system called the flock system to identify her car that the cousin had stolen and driven to Kansas City, and they caught him in Kansas City.
And that is a classic explanation about linking.
Absolutely.
The dog, I mean, years ago, I was writing a little book about it was going to be the Bachelor's Guide to weddings, and I was actually I think it was going to be the Bachelor Lawyer's Guide to weddings.
I got to read that.
There's definitely a movie about that.
And I was going to write a chapter. I was researching for the chapter on engagement rings, because my God, there's so much talk and drama associated with the engagement. And so I conducted all these Westlaw searches on engagement rings. And you know what? Because I was assuming I was going to get a bunch of divorce cases,
right?
About, hey, do I give the ring back or not? Because they're competing jurisdictional views about, who gets the ring.
A gift? Did somebody else break up the other person, repudiating the gift? There are all kinds of
Oh, yeah.
laws
And I remember thinking like, okay, take notes here. But the other place that you get lots of hits on murders, because so oftentimes those wedding rings, those engagement rings would have been under a mattress of some defendant who had robbed and killed somebody.
Absolutely. Anything of value that they can trace back to the deceased that's in the recent unexplained possession of a suspect, that's really bad for them.
Right. And so when I think about affirmative links, what could be better affirmative link than your loyal, reliable dog? I know that, when Annabelle was alive, if I would have been, burned up and thrown in a bucket, she would have been, just distraught. I'm pretty sure of it anyway. So we've got all this forensic evidence on Brad Simpson, and we've got, the stupid inconsistency that he's given the police. We've got an unexplained absence, but it still goes more. There's still more evidence that they're contending with. And one of those things is and this was picked up after the affidavit. He was just indicted about 2 weeks ago. And since then, there has been so much more discussion about a saw. There's a saw that has Suzanne Simpson's DNA on the saw. And, obviously the purchase date of that saw is going to be extremely important.
Absolutely.
The purchase date, as well as what potential uses that saw could have happened. Because no doubt there will be an assertion that, Suzanne was doing some work herself, and, she may have touched the saw.
Cut herself on the saw, done something like that. And then especially just go back to what was purchased at the Home Depot. When a lot of people will think, hey, you know what? I'm going to use something that's in my garage that's years old. I'm going to go buy something at Tom Thumb, such as duct tape. I'm going to go buy the Quick Read at the Lowe's or the local Home Depot, and I'm going to go buy the Clorox at the CVS. The guys that don't even make that kind of effort, you really wonder about their ego and their ability to think that they have deluded themselves, that they're going to get away with this. But when you put the saw, the saw goes with the Clorox. The bucket goes with the Quick Read. And unless I mean, that's why you go talk to the kids. You go talk to the neighbors. Hey, was he doing any home improvement? Hey, kids, was he leveling the kitchen floor, pulling up the tiles and leveling a little concrete? No, Dad doesn't. He's not really handy. He doesn't really do anything like that. Bam. Now we've got a great link, and we've got something to go off of.
Well, and even if he is kind of a do-it-yourselfer, you still have this assortment of items that were purchased.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, Quikrete and Clorox are not necessarily going to be put in the same sentence that often. That's not to say it can't happen, but it's just like you pile on circumstance after circumstance after circumstance, and it just threads a very singular narrative.
And you're absolutely right, Geoff. And especially when you go, my wife is missing, the mother of my children is missing, but you know what I really need to do? I need to level out those stairs.
That's been bothering me a little bit.
Chop down those little willow trees in the back and get some Clorox and make sure that the bathroom's cleaned up. No. Okay, when you put it all together with the timing of it, and, as a former prosecutor, you are salivating at you've already written the closing argument in your head.
Yeah. I mean, what's so funny is, the idea, you're right, the idea of home improvement or speculative home improvement taking place at that moment in time, the mother of your children is missing, and you're thinking about, we could maybe knock down a wall or two and expand that bathroom. What do you think when you think about the sheer horror, the paralysis that would hit a lot of people if their wife were missing? The absolute farthest thing from your mind would be home improvement.
Absolutely. And you brought up a great point about how messy the scenes can be. And when you look at DNA transfer, you look at forensics, which you were bringing up, and you were kind of giving the timeline of no body murders and how England said, wait, we made a major mistake here. What we've got to do is we've got to have some kind of forensic evidence. We've got to have some kind of scientific evidence. And really the first that I can remember is blood spatter evidence. And, okay, so blood transfers to the defendant, transfers to the car, transfers to the glove, anything like that where you have a messy scene with somebody fighting back, flailing, especially in the OJ case. You got Ron Goldman, who's 6'3", 210 pounds. And, how much fight did he give him? Did OJ get him first? Did Nicole try to run? When you look back at that trial and you look back at the forensic evidence, botched or not, or Barry Scheck just coming in there and doing such a great job on the DNA, which was really in his infancy.
And Furman.
Absolutely.
That was
dropping a word that is absolutely verboten, and it ruined it tainted the whole jury pool.
Regrettably.
Absolutely.
And the bottom line is when I was a prosecutor, if something like that, I would have been furious. I'd want to go punch the guy out. But the fact is that doesn't mean he walks.
Right. You can't unring that bell. There's nothing you can do. As a prosecutor, you almost have to just embrace, we call it embracing the ugly baby, right? You got to kiss him. There's nothing you can do about what has been done.
You're right.
So how do you defend, this no body case? How do you defend that?
Yeah. So in this case, your client, your Austin, Brad Simpson, he's got a court-appointed counsel, and I've been told his counsel is quite competent. I've been told that, but obviously he wasn't around in the beginning, where probably at least 24 significant errors had occurred. You're coming on board. And somebody comes, a member of the family, interestingly enough, one note, his family's not behind him. His brother Bart.
That's very interesting.
His family, his brother Bart, has been has given lots of explanations to the press about how dismayed they are by Brad Simpson's failure to assist law enforcement, and I think that they're probably beside themselves with disgust. So assuming somebody comes along and they have enough money to afford Brady, because, good defense lawyers like Brady don't come cheap, but they come in here what's the first thing that you're going to do to defend somebody like Brad, knowing what we know?
I break down the PC affidavit, just like you were mentioning earlier with when a detective writes in the affidavit, they are swearing to that affidavit in front of a judge or a magistrate. And what you want to do is you want to pick that affidavit apart. I go to my client and I say, there you go. There's the PC affidavit. What's right about it? What's wrong about it? Is there anything that we can challenge within the four corners of this warrant or the PC affidavit that gives us an edge? And then the question, if there is something there, the question gets to, do we have a motion to suppress the arrest? Do we have a motion to suppress a cell phone search, a search of the house, a search of the vehicle, where they're looking for any kind of blood spatter, any kind of DNA transfer, looking for her missing cell phone that may have been burned in the pit? All those things that they're looking for, is there a way to challenge not only the factual recitation in the PC affidavit, but also whether or not that actually arises to the level of probable cause for the issuance of a search warrant or an arrest warrant? Because going back to a point you made earlier, Geoff, is that we were talking about the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment does not apply when your client is at home and they knock on the door and say, hey, will you talk to us? It only applies to custodial interrogation. If you're not in custody, they can ask you all the questions you want. You can stop the interview, walk away, ask for a lawyer, and they can never use the fact that you asked for a lawyer against you. They can't use your silence against you. One of the first questions I have is, hey, we'll break down the PC affidavit. You want to build a bond, you want to build a relationship with your client, but then at the end you want to be like, what were you thinking? What were you doing going in there and talking to these guys, and what did you really say? They recorded it all. And there's a good reason. Not only do I want to know what my client said, I want to know what they were asking, because I can learn more from the questions that they're asking than I can from my client's answers.
Right. And that's one of the common complaints I have about news coverage frequently. It's like, well, wait a second, we hear these answers, but we don't even know how this person answered this question, because we don't know what the question that was posed to him.
So what does a question tell you? How they ask the question, what does that tell you? Why do you want to know that?
It tells you the orientation of what this person knows and what they believe, what they hope to believe, and a lot of times it tells you what they don't know. Sometimes that's
the key. What they don't know.
Sometimes it just, and again, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect science. I mean, like even when you take a deposition, it's one part, challenge the witness, but it's another part just, digging to ascertain what it is that took place. And what people, defendants and witnesses of all kinds always don't grasp is that the questioner, whether it's a detective or a skilled lawyer who's got a box of documents next to him, knows a lot more about what he's inquiring of than the witness does. The witness is just kind of thinking like, we're in this little room and it's just you and me, and that's the entire scope of the inquiry. When in fact, in a situation like the Simpson case, there are all these things that are taking place simultaneously in real time.
So do you think it's more, so the reason I think that the question was so important is, they're already like ganged up against this guy. So the question is important because how they're asking it is important.
Absolutely. How they ask the question, let's just take a cell phone, for example. Hey, her cell phone went missing at the Albertsons, but then since it was missing, you turned the cell phone off. There's no reason that you would turn a cell phone off that was missing. Oh, no, that's exactly why I turned it off, because it was missing and I didn't want anybody else to use it. But haven't you turned that cell phone off in the past a few times? Was it missing then? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, how do you answer that question? Well, no. Was your wife missing then? Did you tell your kids? And then just lead into browbeating him and then pull back, okay? So when you hear what they're focusing on, if you have one question about the Clorox, but you have 15 questions about the cell phones, well, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a very good lawyer to figure that out. But sometimes the defendant doesn't figure that out. And that's how he puts himself back in harm's way, walks right into a trap, and they don't even see it coming.
Well, and, thankfully, frankly, they don't. because we do want these guys caught.
As long as they're not my client, yes.
That is so funny at how many times I've heard criminal defense attorneys like, when I was a prosecutor, they'd wish me luck on my next trial. And it was like, I guess he wants me to win. Is he just being polite, or is he want me to get a bad guy? But the fact is, that little point that he brought up about the cell phones is just one among so many things that, when these things happen, every little thing that you're going to be doing is under scrutiny. And as well it should be. And it's going to be, and these guys are wholly incapable of processing all that. Now, Simpson, in addition to trying to avert the authorities by turning off the cell phones and traveling to the adjacent counties and burning the burning the phones or attempting to burn the phones and the Clorox and all this other stuff, he also made a couple of purchases in cash. He did not do, even though, as Brady shrewdly pointed out, the purchases at Home Depot were done collectively, but he actually, with respect to certain payments, made them in cash, presumably, and the authorities the Rangers have already made this deduction that you were wanting to conceal certain purchases but not others.
Absolutely, that works great if you're not being surveilled, right? If you're being followed, it doesn't matter what you buy it with. They're watching you go in the store. They're watching you come out of the store with the products. And if you think you're being sly about something like that, then once again, we get back to the deluding yourself at that point in time. You are a suspect in a murder case. Do you think they're not watching you? Do you think they're not following you around and watching what you're doing? And that the actions after the fact, not just what was happening in the planning. Maybe this was planned. It doesn't sound like it was planned very well. If it was probably more in the heat of the moment kind of thing here. But your actions afterwards really are the telltale sign about your guilt.
Well, and one other thing too is, in one of those places in particular, I think it was at the Valero gas station, he made one purchase with the Visa debit card, and he made the other one in cash. And it's like, why would you have bisected your purchasing? It's like, you got it out, you do this, you do that.
And something about the gas station that would slip by a lot of lawyers, and I'm sure did not slip by the investigators, is, okay, you've got a big truck. It sounds like a big F-150 or F-250, something that uses a lot of gas. But if you're driving, hey, where did you go the morning that your wife, well, I dropped my daughter off at school, then I went to the office, I went back to pick her up. Okay, so you drove about 13, 14 miles. That's going to burn about a gallon of gas. Wait, you filled up twice in 3 days at the Valero, one purchase in cash, trying to be sneaky about this. So when you told me that he was going out to Bandera County, okay, is that the only county? I don't know if they had him surveilled the whole way, but you can look at how much fuel he's burning, and he's not just jotting around town picking up his kids and dropping them off at soccer.
No, not at all. And again, going back to the whole premise that your wife is missing, and you've made these unusual purchases, and then now couple that with the idea that you're in Bandera County, approximately this, for people in Dallas, this would be like going to Weatherford.
Okay.
This is not simply the adjacent county, but one county, over. And so, I don't know that I've ever even been to Weatherford. But
I've had a few cases out there. It's an interesting place.
Yeah, I've been accused.
You do very well out there.
I've been accused of not going past the bubble very often. Beyond Mockingbird or Northwest Highway. But the idea that, not only do you have these purchases, at Home Depot, but then this long commute to an adjacent county, the pile, things start piling up. The last question I want to tackle, because we're running out of time, is you've got all this powerful circumstantial evidence. And one thing that I've seen defendants do in these cases before is cut a deal, because everybody, the family, and some of these things go beyond prosecution. Some of these things can go to typically sentimental concerns, but also civil liability concerns.
Absolutely.
And insurers are going to want to know this stuff. I mean, I can already imagine just cussing out a life insurance company over this, like, oh, okay, yeah, well, she could still, yeah, okay, no, but the families frequently do want to know. They want to be able to bury or cremate. They want to have some closure. So what do defendants sometimes do?
They've got some chips.
They've cut a deal. So how much? But here's the thing: he is and deliver the body. Whatever condition it is.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because that was one of the old interrogation techniques, right? You find out what religion the person is, who is a suspect, and we need to give them a Christian burial. You need to do it for the family. And you would be surprised how well that actually worked. Now,
so if it's a Muslim, you'd say,
we got to get it within 3 days. We got to do it. We got to do it fast. We want to make sure she's in hallowed ground so she can go to heaven. Now,
so you know what? I have to tell you, you just gave me another reason to be an atheist. So I just like, okay, well, it's just going to decompose, one way or the other. So
absolutely, but going back to the chip part of that, you have a bargaining chip, and the bargaining chip is where is the body, right?
Right.
But as a civil
because people want to know.
It means something. It is very important to know where your daughter is, where your sister is, where your mother is, and maybe even the defendant says, I did something horrible, but I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make it right for my children, for their family, so they don't think I'm a total monster. But also, as a civil attorney, that in a criminal act, depending on how the policy is written, the life insurance may not pay out, A, if the body's not recovered, but also B, if it is a criminal act of someone and they get convicted of a specific intent crime.
Right.
You plead a manslaughter, you take 20, all of a sudden it's reckless. I ran out to the woods. She started fighting me. I pulled out a knife that I had because she scratched my face, and she fell down and she died.
And I'll take that lawsuit anytime because the fact is that the carrier says, no, this was, it's like, no, you know what? You don't know. We'll just go ahead and I'm going to have some very sympathetic plaintiffs here, the daughter and the son, and Jesus. You've got, if he doesn't love his wife, presumably he would love his children.
Exactly.
And let's face it, a homicide like this goes to trial. It's going to be tied up on appeal for 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
If petition to cert all the way up, or whether it's to the Supremes or the Court of Criminal Appeals, it's not going to happen overnight. And so, but here's the problem, and I was thinking about is this. Brad Simpson, I believe, is 51 or 54. I think he's 54.
Okay.
She's 51, he's 54. So that's pretty far. You can't, given the parole eligibility laws, you really can't come up with a number. You would think that it'd be like, okay, well, hey, Brad, without him dying in prison is what I'm getting at.
The difference between, and that goes to a very good point about how I talked to a defendant facing a very serious crime, a first-degree felony, 5 to 99 to life, especially in a murder-type situation, is there is a way to bargain down. But the way I talk to a 21-year-old about the number versus the way I talk to a 51-year-old or a 54-year-old about the number is, hey, listen, you give up the body, they're saying that possibly manslaughter is on the table. You got to take the maximum at 20. You're parole eligible after 10 years, even though you're not going to get parole after 10 years on a manslaughter like this that is really a murder case. But it's a way for the family to put it behind them. It gets rid of the appeal process, and hopefully if there is a life insurance policy, leave it to a guy like you to be able to collect for the family and do the right thing.
Well, it's a terrible case. And I have to tell you, my heart really does go out to the Simpsons and frankly, that community there in San Antonio. When I read this story and when I watched some of the news broadcasts, I can't say that I wept, but It was heart-wrenching. And on that, until next week, we will see you soon.